my ghetto hero. I watch him live fat as I watch him die slow. My ghetto hero. I watch him live fat as I watch him die slow. My ghetto hero. I watch him live fat as I watch him die slow. The mission complete and took off the street, locked up by the police. Lace Meatball in that. Meatball in that. Meatball in that.
My name is Elwood, but to everyone that knows me, whether they know me as a family member, friends, or foe, they all know me by my nickname, which is Nap. This is the nickname given to me by my family. I'm presently incarcerated at the United States Federal Penitentiary in Macquarie, Kentucky, where I'm serving 3 concurrent life sentences plus 30 years for conspiracy to distribute cocaine, murder, and attempt murder in aid of racketeering. I have been in federal custody since the day of my arrest on July 12, 1991, after leaving a Holiday Inn hotel located on Highway 51 in La Place, Louisiana. That ended my drug career as a drug dealer and my status as a free man. I wanted to speak out as briefly as I can in this phone interview, which actually is the first time that I've ever spoken out about my situation, what it took for me to end up in prison for the duration of my life. For all intents and purposes, my situation is twofold. On one side of the fold consists of me making poor choices and bad decisions, which I take total responsibility and accountability for. On the flip side of that fold is the fact that I fell prey to a fundamentally and more materially corrupt criminal justice system that is rife with systematic racism. Before I go any further, I'd like to give you a little brief history and background on me. For you to fully understand and appreciate where I'm coming from and where I'm going with this interview, I must tell you about my upbringing. I'm a native of New Orleans, Louisiana, where I was primarily raised in a community known as the Callio housing project by a single mom who divorced my father in 1966. And I, along with my older sister, was surrounded in this Callio housing project by a number of cousins, uncles, aunts, grandmothers, and my great-grandmother, who all at one time lived in the same community. So it was readily apparent to me, by looking at my own situation, being the first member of my family to ever be convicted of a crime, that it wasn't the poor conditions of the Callio housing project that caused me to make these poor choices and poor decisions. It was just me and my bad decision-making that factored into that circumstance. The Callio project was a lifestyle for most of us that lived back there, but it was also a brand. The Callio project had a lucrative drug market that was dominated by one particular drug. That drug was the king. That king was named heroin, which brought customers from all around the city and other parishes. It also shaped the attitude of all of us who grew up in that divided community. The composite of the Callio project consisted of the old side of the Callio project and the new side. It also consisted of the front of town side and the back of town side. But when you're dealing with drugs such as heroin, that is it forms a man's or woman's attitude that uses it. They're usually very, very aggressive. Aggressive drug users bring on an enhanced aggressive attitude from drug dealers. That, coupled with the fact that in Louisiana, the distribution of heroin carries a life sentence. Most of the drug dealers that dealt with heroin had an attitude that is no difference in getting life for distributing heroin, or getting life for murdering somebody that mess with you concerning your money or your heroin. And that attitude also formed and shaped the whole community in which we grew up in the Callio housing project. And this is what defined the guys from the Callio project. It was a cultural identity. This is why so many of us had an aggressive attitude and a very violent, approach to the way we deal with our circumstances and our lifestyle. This is where I learned my way. My first sexual experience at 13 happened in the Callio housing project. My skills and my ability to fight, my courage, my appetite to hustle, and yes, my first gun, all developed and derived from my growing up in the Callio housing project. I also learned my self-respect and a lot of respect for others. The Callio project, it really provided something for all of us that we really needed. And that was that when a situation demands aggressive energy, no matter what, that energy would be on tap. But when a situation required calmness, compassion, or reflection, a man from the Callio project would have a full supply of that as well. I kind of hesitate at this point, and I approach from here on forward very tentatively, because I have to speak of men that factored into my life in growing up in that project. I speak of them with profound respect. But
this call is from a federal prison.
But it would be impossible for me to go any further with talking about anything without mentioning these people. So I want to make sure that everybody understands that I speak of these people not as friends or as enemies, but as men that factored into my life, and I did have a lot of respect for them. As a teenager in the Callio project was pretty much dominated at the time by a true legend. His name was Broadnax. Broadnax and his brother controlled the market in the Callio housing project, and consisted of what was called teas and blues. Teas and blues was a synthetic form of heroin, which was melted down and used to a syringe, IV used to a syringe. The nickname for those drugs was called Metz. But by Al having control of the drug market, another true legend from the Callio housing project came home from Angola, Louisiana State Penitentiary in Angola, by the name of Samuel Lee Clay, a.k.a. Sam Scully. I met Sam Scully in 1978 through my cousin and one of my best friends, which was named Terrell Sterling. Terrell Sterling was a main factor in Sam Scully's upbringing, and not upbringing as being raised, but his upbringing in the drug market in the Callio housing project, because Sam Scully was never from the Callio housing project. He lived off of Jackson Street, which is the neighborhood across the street from the Callio housing project. Terrell Sterling was born and raised back there in the project.
Before we can go any further, the question has to be answered. Who was Terrell Sterling?
There's another guy out the Callio that I think is underrated. And he's only underrated outside of Uptown, because people Uptown know who he is. And his name is Terrell Sterling. Turbo. Turbo been around a long time. He's no longer with us, but he was around a long time. He survived a lot of eras. I mean, the man is like a forefather to the, how do you say, to the trigger man. He wasn't a baller. Terrell wasn't a baller. You know what I'm saying? He wasn't what we call a big timer. But he was the forefather of all the people that's around that we hear about.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? He was there. You know what I'm saying? He to me, he was the teacher of people like Marlowe, Helmstetter, Chico. He was even all the way up to the 90s when you're talking Randall Watts. This is the guy who all these people looked up to. He taught these guys how to be who they were. So he gets no attention because that's the type of person he was. He was always in the background teaching. And all those guys I named and more will stand up for him at any moment if they could. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is the dude right here. This is who taught me how to walk. This is the dude who showed me things. You know what I'm saying? He survived the era all the way back from the beginning. When it was Al Broadnax and Fat Tanner, and he even survived through the Glen Metz. He survived through the Naps. He survived through it all the way up to the 90s, where Randall Watts was out there. In fact, he was there when Randall fell. And when the new era came in the 2000s, Terrell Sterling was there, and he was still mentoring. He still was showing. And guess what? At the end of his life, he didn't die by a bullet. To me, that is the ultimate gangster. That's who deserves all praise. A lot of people don't get to retire at all. You know, we usually get killed or go to jail for a long time. You know, and it was a man who can walk anywhere. I'm talking about Magnolia, Callio, St. Thomas, Seven Walls, St. Bernard. I mean, wherever you put him at, he can walk. Because people know who he was. That's Terrell Sterling. That's Turbo. And you're going to give him all the respect. Because he earned it. And if you didn't give him respect, he knew how to get it out of you. And he was the type of guy where he didn't even have to do anything anymore. If somebody even heard that you was going to disrespect Terrell, or somebody was trying to creep down on Terrell, you don't know who's going to come get you. That's just how the respect he held.
So it was paramount of Terrell as Scully's right-hand man to develop a team. We all called themselves, the A-team. The A-team consisted of young men who were good hustlers and had a propensity to use firearms, which was guns, during the 70s. Young teenagers were real aggressive young men. A lot of people have spoken of Scully over the years, but some of them were rubberneckers. Some of them spoke because of stories they heard. There was also stories told about Sam through the newspapers of Time-Picayune, through magazines and stuff, which most of those stories were, what we call looky-loos. They were more or less from people that did not really have an inside track of a lot of things, but more of a associate or friends or just heard the stories. But most of them never knew really what went on concerning the drug trade, the actual team that it consisted of, and how Sam Scully rose to dominance and power in the Callio Project. When I speak of Terrell Sterling and Sam Scully, you must first know that these two were so tight they even went to jail and was charged for a murder in the early 1980s together. Even though those charges was dismissed, it's a symbol and a sign that these people were real close. Everybody from back then actually knew that these people were close. It was like a big brother, little brother relationship. But over the course of that relationship, Sam's true rise came from Broadnax, who furnished all the heroin and everything that was being distributed to Scully into the Callio housing project. Over the next several years, which maybe went from 78 to the early 80s, Sam rose to dominance, but he still relied on Broadnax. Over that period of time, Broadnax came up dead. In 1983, Broadnax was found dead in his house located on North Derby, on downtown in the 8th Ward in New Orleans. He was found by family members maybe after being dead 3 or 4 days in his house. This death of Broadnax actually caused a rift in the relationship of Terrell Sterling and the A-team and Sam Scully. That divide came because the A-team felt as though Sam was responsible for Al's death. They didn't want to have anything else to do with Sam at that point. But Terrell Sterling did, because not only was that his friend, it was also a supplier of the product, as heroin in the Callio housing project. So they made a compromise wherein it was like, well, we'll still spend the money with you, but we want to go on our own way. Scully wasn't too happy with that situation, but he went along with it for a minute until the products that he started giving Terrell was kind of way weaker than what the products that he was actually distributing in the Callio housing project. That created what was known as the big split. At that point, it would be no more of us dealing with you or you dealing with us. In fact, we don't really want you in this project anymore. That initiated what became the war in the Callio housing project. In 1984, after Sam was spinning drugs to the Callio housing project, he made a statement after his drugs was being taken from people that he was supplying, that he would do something to anybody that messed with his drugs. Well, the 18 felt as though they was going to put a stop to Scully and his drug dealers once and for all. He was gunned down, but he did not perish. He did not die in 1984 when he was shot. Upon his recovery, that initiated what became a turf war in the Callio housing project, wherein Sam Scully was no longer able to ever come in the project without the threat of him being murdered. And also, Sam Scully was not accepting the fact that he was shot as a, I'm going to lay down and quit. That derived more and more violence between two other people. The war that was taking place in the Callio project that consisted of the Carroll and the 18, and Scully was pretty much an unconventional war because Sam Scully didn't have a team anymore, where the 18 was consisted of guys from the front of town side of the Callio housing project. So most of Sam Scully's armed forces came from what we was calling hitters, or guys that were paid or closely related to Scully coming home from Angola. They pretty much took on his problems in this war, for whatever the purpose is. I don't know about the money aspect of it or whatever, but for whatever the purpose, they sided with Scully and began to try to take the lives of the guys on the 18 side, which in return flourished into the 18 guys using the aggressive nature and aggressive tactics that they knew from the growing up in the Callio housing project by attack. The whole concept of it was the best defense is a great offense, always attack. So that started in 1984, which took the lives of guys like Pissy Bob.
This call is from a federal prison.
Other people died on Sam, that was closely affiliated with Sam Scully's side as well. This war went on for the next several years, wherein in 1986, Sam was shot again. And he didn't die, but another man died on the scene of that shooting as well. And the real reason that I'm speaking of Al, Broadnax, Sam Scully, Harold Sterling, is because all of those integral parts of the Callio housing project factored into my circumstances in being in prison today. It's an integral part of my trial, which wasn't really a trial, it was a proceeding. But it was an integral part of what I'm sitting in prison for today. So I spoke on all of those factors because I wanted to get into what has taken place with me over the years, which caused me to make the statement early on that my situation is twofold. My association with the ways of the Callio project is my fault. My involvement with drugs is all my fault. I take full accountability for that. But the prosecution for the murders that I sit in prison for, which is the murder of Sam Scully, the murder of a guy named Michael Wilson, the murder of a young lady by the name of Donna Ellis, had nothing to do with me or any of the people that I'm actually indicted with in federal court. And I provided some documents so that I could explain what really took place and how it transpired. I never spoke on our circumstances and situations because my situation was dictated by propaganda. What I mean by that is that the government, United States government, which is the U.S. Attorney's Office, employed Time Picayune newspaper, Channel 4, Channel 6, Channel 8, and the local news station to put on this major drug trial, which is wound up being the first, what was called racketeering drug trial in the history of New Orleans, the prosecution in federal court, due to the fact that none of us that were indicted cooperated with the government. They never actually established a true, what they would call racketeering case. They took different parts of different people's lives try to consistently put them together and say, cohesively put them together and say, okay, this was part of one unified organization and group, but nothing was further from the truth. It was the whole situation that I'm in was dictated by disinformation and deliberate and calculated systemic racism in the way that the government goes about prosecuting cases. So what I want to do is explain to you what I mean by that.
Okay.
My first document, which is document number 1, it consists of a state court indictment wherein I, myself, along with Marlo Helmstetter, Eric Mahone, Gennaro Arthur, were all indicted in Jefferson Parish in 1990 for the murder of Michael Wilson, Donna Ellis, and 3 attempt murders. A guy named Fernandez Fields, Ulysses White, and another young man by the name of Wilford Carr. We were indicted and charges were dismissed in 1991, in March of 1991, by a prosecutor by the name of Karen Morgan, who determined that there was not any evidence to proceed with a prosecution under the state laws of Louisiana for first-degree murder. Okay, when you go to document number 2 is a situation in 1989, which is where the indictment in 1990 derived from. In 1989, I was shot on Galvez and Delia Street at 3:08 in the daytime. After parking my vehicle and walking into the courtyard in the building in the Callio housing project. Also shot was a young man that day. His name was Tornado Bell. He was shot a block down the street at Nero and Delia, pretty much related to the same incident. If you look at the document that I show you, that I'm displaying, it shows that upon arrival, the officers located victim number 1, Gerald Knapp Elwood, Negro male, 11-12-60, lying face down their vehicle on South Galvez and Delia Street. Victim had been shot in the right arm and in the left leg. Victim number 1 was unable to give any description of the perpetrators or any accounts of the incident. Lying on the stairs in the 3400 block of Delia Street, victim number 2 was shot in the right leg. Victim number 2 stated that he was walking on the 3400 block of Delia Street towards South Galvez. He observed victim number 1 standing on Galvez Street near his vehicle. Victim number 2 stated he then observed the blue and gray Blazer occupied by Michael Wilson and Levi Jonigan, described on page 2. He also noted a maroon-colored Plymouth occupied by a man named Sidney Adams. He went on to say that these people were the guys who started shooting and who shot me and him on that day. That indictment that I spoke of in document number 1 derived from the statement of Tornado Bell alone. There's no other evidence linking me to the death of Michael Wilson. It was the statement that Tornado Bell made that was a block away from me when he got shot that consisted of me being indicted along with Gennaro Meatball Arthur, Marlo Helmstetter, and Derek Mahone. My document number 3 takes, I'm wrong here, I'm sorry there. At that point, after my case was dismissed in state court, I was indicted for my arrest on July the 12th, 1991, after leaving a Holiday Inn hotel. My truth co-defendants was a young man by the name of Rudolph Tennyson, another young man by the name of Ernest Marrero, and the last young man was named William Ball. Those are my true co-defendants. Those are the guys that I was arrested with for 2 kilos of cocaine and a couple of guns, leaving the hotel with some money. So I, along with 2 other those guys, went to trial in federal court in Section 8 under a judge named Judge Riverdale, and went to trial, was found guilty by 11 whites and 1 black. But I did have a fair trial, and I was convicted. They received 10 years, I received 13 years for that incident. while I was in custody for that very same drug case and serving my time, the federal government indicted me again in 1992, August of 1992, and brought me back to New Orleans to face trial along with Glenn Metz, Danielle Metz, Noah Moore, Gennaro Meatball Ordu.
Gennaro Arthur, better known as Meatball, is one of the most notorious names in uptown New Orleans, if not the entire New Orleans. However, very little has been said about Arthur the man, and when it comes to myths and folklore, Arthur's name has been at the forefront of many of those myths. Here's what a family member of Arthur, who wishes to remain anonymous, had to say.
Meatball has become more of a legend that he's not here than when he was here. You know what I'm saying? I mean, there's a lot of myth put it on top of his head. You know, a lot of things that he was charged for in the streets, he didn't really do. You know what I'm saying? He didn't do a lot of those things. And I'm not saying that just because of the family ties. I'm pretty much saying it because it's real. You know, I know a lot of things about Meatball. I remember one of the things about Meatball that kind of stuck to people and it kind of went around and people copycatted it was they say that Meatball used to dress like a woman and rob people or even kill people. And that was far from the truth as possible. You know, the reason that he wore dress, it was a joke. It was him and a few of his homies, you know, they were dressed up like women. And it was for Halloween. And they pretty much just were bullshitting around. But, of course, they had guns on.
Yeah.
I mean, they were street dudes, you know. So people just attributed that to, oh, they're going to rob somebody and kill somebody dressed like a woman. And that story stuck. And even to this day, everybody say that about it. And that's just not what happened. That's one of the myths that was thrown on top of it that wasn't true. You know, I'm kind of get you crazy right quick. One of the terms that he was known for saying was, drop it like it's hot. Actually, his saying, he made that up. And of course, the rappers not saying it when Wayne said it in the song and things, but that was attributed to him robbing people. When he came to rob you, he would say, drop it like it's hot. Meaning you just drop whatever you got, drop it on the ground. You know what I'm saying? That's where that term comes from. He also had another term was, I caught you with it, I got to get it. That was the little slang words that he would say when he robbing you or taking something from you. Because I'm not saying that, you gotta understand, I'm not saying that Meatball is completely innocent of a lot of things that happened. Of course, you know, he did some things, you know, but all of that they piled up on is the truth. One thing about it is, even now he's in jail, you know, and all the charges that he's in jail for is drugs. If anybody knows Meatball, he never sold drugs. That wasn't his thing. He wasn't a drug dealer. You know, he may have been friends with drug dealers. He hung around with drug dealers, but him himself wasn't a drug dealer. In fact, that was one of the things that kind of one of his flaws. You know, he was drug using. You know what I'm saying? He was using drugs during those times in the 80s. You know, it was okay for the dope boy or the street nigga, you know, putting their work out there to use drugs. You know, a lot of dudes was on heroin, a lot of dudes was on crack, you know, and it was to a point where some people smoked Primos, but if you was smoking Primos, man, you was pretty considered a cool guy. You wasn't considered a crackhead, you know. Now, like I said, Meatball had a vice. You know, he was getting high, and that was one of the things that, you know, put him in the flawed category. Fighting a lot of demons, and he was trying to get rid of some things. You know, he knew he had a drug addict, you know, and he was pretty much the most wanted man in New Orleans at the time, and not by the police, just by everybody. You know, somebody wanted a piece of him. Every which way but loose. You know, and those things were like, he's looking at himself, you know, like, man, I got the fame, but I ain't got the cash. You know what I'm saying? And not only that, some of the things that's going on, he wasn't approving of it. You know, so it was fucking with it, you know. So that's why he left. He left to go get himself together. You gotta remember when they found him, he had a job. The man was working. He wasn't on a run, so he went and got a job. He was already out there. I'm not saying that the guy is innocent of everything in life. Only thing I'm saying is the things that they got him in prison for is false. None of those things he had nothing to do with it. See, the thing is, let me tell you, there was an incident that happened in the Magnolia Project with Meatball. And it fucked Meatball up the way things turned out. And I'm not going to get off into what happened. You know what I'm saying? I'm just going to say it was some gangster shit happened. And somebody ended up getting hurt. And it told Meatball apart that happened like that. And from that moment on, he was just seeking other things. He started going to church. Can you believe that? The man went to church. You know, because his mind was so fucked up, he couldn't even sleep that night. You know, if his mother would talk to you, you understand that she'll tell you that, man, that shit was tormenting. You know, he couldn't sleep a lot. You know what I'm saying? He had to eat sleeping pills just to get some sleep. You know, that incident had to turn his stomach to all the shit that was going on in his life. So even today, if he would have never went to prison, who knows what and what he would be in life. He could be a good guy. He could be a preacher. He could be a whole lot of things.
Marlo Low Helmstead, Troy Lawrence, Podesta Tolliver, and Shane Sturff. This is done what they call the field indictment. It didn't consist of a very, what you would call, thorough investigation. It consisted of people that were already arrested, charged, or convicted for a crime, and they started cooperating with the government at that point. My role in that whole case went back to one particular thing. The same murders that was dismissed in Jefferson Parish for lack of evidence, the federal government seeks to bring it in under what they call a racketeering indictment. That indictment did not derive, as I stated earlier, from evidence in Jefferson Parish. It did not derive from ballistics, forensic. It did not derive from any of us cooperating with one another. And it did not derive from anything to do with the federal government with wiretaps or any source of resource of the DEA, FBI, ATF, New Orleans Police Department, or Jefferson Parish Police Department. It only consisted of guys that were in jail that you'll learn in a minute what they did to get this testimony from them. Okay, so at the proceeding, which I would not call a trial again, that took place in section D under a judge named Judge McNamara, he chose, after the government would not give us any police reports or anything to do with the investigation in Jefferson Parish for the murder of Michael Wilson and Donna Ellis, he determined that he would seal all police reports. That's what my document number 3 consists of. The lawyer for Gennaro Arthur subpoenaed all police reports, which is normal. We're supposed to be entitled under the 5th Amendment of the United States to due process, wherein any evidence that exculpates us from a crime, we are entitled to it under the Supreme Court precedent. But in our case, we were denied those reports. They didn't want no one to hear what the police had to say about their year or 11-month-long investigation that took place from April of 1990 to March of 1991. Everything was sealed. So what you get at that point is a bunch of narrative that's made up in the U.S. Attorney's Office, not facts related to investigation, but statements that the government wants to be heard, but they don't want anything to refute anything that they're about to have their witnesses testify to. So if you look at my document number 4, this is during the course of the proceeding. Document number 4 shows
This call is from a federal prison.
the federal judge that was presiding over my trial, which was named McNamara, tells our defense attorney, now about line 14, it goes, now what about in regard to the JP reports that you subpoenaed, Mr. Bukowski? I have gone through those reports over the weekend, and I'm convinced that you're not entitled to anything that has not been given to you. If somebody testifies to something on the stand that I think makes you entitled to something else, I will give it to you. Mr. Bukowski, which is Gennaro Meatball's lawyer, Meatball's polygraph interview. And which, anybody that knows anything about trials, polygraph interviews are not admissible in evidence, so you can't use that. And some search warrant, I'm not sure if we've been given anything from Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office. So I said that I showed you that and said that to let you see that the court determined that he's not giving us any information about murder. So we are sitting in prison today without one homicide detective involved in our case. Nothing to do with police involved in a murder case. Now, number 5 is the real reason that I spoke intensively about Sam Scully, Broadnax, Sam Scully, and the war that was going on in the Callio housing project. This is the federal indictment that I'm in prison for today, along with 8 other co-defendants. What is consisted of on page 2 of that indictment is the manner and means of the conspiracy. What they mean by that statement is what
my ghetto hero. I watch him live fat as I watch him die slow. My ghetto hero. I watch him live fat as I watch him die slow. My ghetto hero.